to Clarity on Fire, a podcast for people who know what they don't want out of their life and career, but aren't sure what they'd rather be doing.
In a world where it's easy to exist, but hard to feel alive, we, Kristen
and Rachel,
2 certified life and career coaches, are here to help you cut through the information overload, get unstuck, and focus not just on how you can have a career you're passionate about, but how to create a whole life that feels fulfilling.
So join us here, where we serve up inspiration and down-to-earth wisdom in a way that only 2 best friends can.
We want you to experience the relief of knowing that, yes, you're allowed to want more out of your life and career.
And no, you don't have to wander through the dark anymore. Our job is to light the fire that shows you the way. Let's go.
Hi.
Hey.
Well, you're a mess. You're a mess.
I've had a couple of weeks.
I can't with you. So have I.
Yeah, we've had a couple of weeks for very different reasons.
Yeah, and I'm moving in 2 days. Mm-hmm. And all of you are so excited about that, right? You're like, wait, go back. Yes, I'm getting out of my parents' house. At the time we were recording this, I should be moving in 48 hours. And so the next time we podcast, it should be back in my house.
Yay.
Together, as long as you don't have any other disasters that you can't afford to see me.
No promises.
Well, it's going to be 3 weeks since I've actually seen you by the next time I see you.
Which is stupid. Totally crazy because we live 30 minutes apart, but
it's not that far.
I know, but life has been a little bit wild. I won't get into all of the details, but just
no one cares.
Suffice it to say.
They might care, but it's boring, so it's not worth talking about.
Just like life sometimes throws you some curveballs.
My story's not boring, but they're not hearing it unless they're a Patreon member.
Teaser if you want to join our Patreon.
And not even the whole story until the fall, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so before we dive into Dear Krachel, I did want to, it's been a while since I came hat in hand begging for, not begging, because I have dignity, for a rating and a review. If you,
we love them.
You love and if you love this podcast and you have benefited from it and you've been listening to it and it hasn't yet occurred to you to give us a rating and a review, listen, a rating I'll always take. Every once in a while I see a new rating and I'm like, that's nice. I get a lot more dopamine when I get a review. Okay.
It's a free gift you can give us. And we love it. It makes our day.
It really does. So, and it helps other people find us too. Like, I don't know, it's good for the algorithm, and what's good for the algorithm is good for me. So, as I've always said.
That's one of Rachel's famous sayings.
Famous. And have you noticed? No, you haven't because you never log in, but I have been posting regularly on Instagram, and I would like someone to praise me for the fact that I have been not only posting, I've been making reels. From our podcast content, which takes more editing than you would think to get it down to a clean minute of comprehensible nugget of information to put on the internet.
I know.
And I've been doing that. Like,
you're acting like a real millennial right now. It's good for our business.
I do it.
It's hard for us because we're not, we're old people on the inside.
Always have been. Mm-hmm. So anyway, if you're not following us on Instagram, well, you actually are missing stuff now.
Yeah, if you weren't before, I would be like, well, yeah, of course you're not. Like, we're not even doing anything. But now you should. You should, because you're going to get
on fire.
Little snippets.
Yeah, and I posted some good stuff. I posted one the other day that like really blew up. I mean, by blow up, I mean like, almost 200 people liked it, which is a lot when you haven't posted on Instagram in 2 years.
I was just thinking, is this the first time we've ever asked anyone to follow us on social media? I think it maybe is. I think this is a first.
Anyway, so yeah, give us a follow, LOL, or a rating and review. Like on whatever platform you listen to.
Obviously, I don't. But if you have to pick one, I guess. But why not do both?
That's true. Why not both? Okay, so. Now that my shameless request for validation is check. Got that off the list. Let's talk about Dear Krachel.
Yeah, we got, as always, as usual, I would say, we've got 3 good questions. Sometimes if they're real meaty questions, we have only a couple, but let's jump right into number 1.
Go ahead. You can read it.
Okay. Dear Krachel, I've been working as a 3D artist for 4 years. I'm currently struggling with the idea that I don't enjoy my job because I'm not satisfied with the art I'm creating compared to my seniors in the same field. Here are my questions. Do I have to be good at my job to enjoy it? What if I really suck at my job? Sometimes I feel that I'm fighting against some unknown force telling me that this is not the right path. Maybe I just need more time to practice and study, but that thought is starting to feel really daunting. I hope you can give me some advice on this topic. Thanks for reading, from Andrea.
Okay.
Multiple questions in there.
And I have multiple questions
in response.
For her. Okay, so here's my big first question. She said she's been working as a 3D artist for 4 years. She said she's struggling because she doesn't really feel like it's satisfying, because she doesn't feel good at it in comparison to other people who've been doing it longer. Is that a sign that something is off? I never got a feel or any indication for whether she ever liked it. All I know is that she's been doing it for 4 years and she's currently struggling. So, like, Andrea, did you ever enjoy your work as a 3D artist?
You're right. That's a different conversation. If your answer is, yeah, I loved it when I got started, or when I was studying it, or at the beginning, and I've lost my love, this might go in a different direction. If you never loved it that much in the first place and you're still struggling after 4 years, then yeah, that might be a pretty good sign. Like, this is just not a good fit. So that's a good clarification point. I'd love Andrea to write us back some of her answers. We can maybe do a part 2. I have multiple thoughts. One of these is, I get this sense that what might be causing, or at least certainly one of the factors that's causing her dissatisfaction, is that she keeps comparing herself to other people and feeling like she's falling short. She even says, when I compare myself to my seniors in the field, when you're comparing yourself to someone who's more senior than you, of course you're not going to be as good as them. That's just the nature of expertise. So if you're expecting yourself to be as good as the people who have been doing this a lot longer than you, and now you're feeling bad about yourself that you're not there yet, then even if you do love what you're doing, you might end up killing your own joy of it because you're letting your perfectionism sour your art.
This kind of feels like,
harken back to last week's episode about perfectionism
with Sam Laura Brown.
We should link to that one.
Yeah, if Andrea hasn't listened to that, she needs to go back a week and listen. This kind of feels like classic younger sibling syndrome, where, and I wouldn't know, but because I think I have the opposite problem, but a lot of younger siblings develop this complex where they feel like they're not as smart, or they're not as pretty, because they have this older sibling who's always smarter than them because their brain is more developed, and they're always better looking because they've gone through puberty and you're still awkward and pimply. And so it's, comparison is the thief of joy, period. We know that, right? But especially when you're comparing to people who aren't even on the same timeline as you. So what I'm potentially hearing is someone who doesn't have a great tolerance for feeling bad at something, and is in a situation where that's getting triggered all the time by people who are further along in the process. So I think the question is becoming, do I hate my job, or do I just hate feeling bad at stuff? And do I need to feel bad at it? Probably not.
And am I as bad as I think I am? She literally
probably
asked
not.
the question, what if I really suck at my job? I have doubts that you really
How's
suck
she
at
been
your
doing
job
it for 4 years, right?
Don't you think somebody would have been like,
you suck.
You suck.
You're fired.
Usually if you suck at your job for 4 years, you get fired. I don't think you suck. I think you have interpreted your work as not good because of this loop of comparison. And probably just being really hard on yourself in general.
Yeah.
I want to ask, how hard are you on yourself in other areas of life? Is this the only way where you beat yourself up or you feel not good enough? Because if you're feeling not good enough in other relationships, in other things you're doing outside of work, then this might be more of a self-confidence issue, period, less related to this particular job than it is anything else. So that's another question is like, is this the only area where you feel not good enough? Or do you kind of feel like that's a loop in your head and this is just one aspect of that?
Does she feel like she's behind other people in other areas of life? Like, oh, other people own a home. I don't own a home. Other people make more money. I haven't gotten to that point yet. Like, yes, it's helpful to zoom out and see, is this part of some deeper underlying pattern that I've got going? Probably. Andrea, if I were going to guess, I would say, yeah, probably.
Yeah. What is the old adage? How you do something is how you do anything. I'm doubtful this is the only area where you feel behind and not talented enough or not good enough or not experienced enough. But frankly, if it is, that's maybe telling, right? I just have my doubts.
I have some homework for her for sure.
Great.
She needs to read Big Magic.
Oh, yes.
She needs to read. Okay, so Andrea, we did an episode. If you want to listen to us talk about it first, we did a bonus book club episode. Get ready, Kristen. 4 years ago in June 2018. Terrifying. Yep. On Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. It is about creativity and the relationship between creativity and fear. And so much of what I can tell you're struggling with is what she directly addresses in that book, which is, I feel like the joy has been sucked out of this whole experience. And art has all of a sudden become something that is about labor and work and maybe grind. And it doesn't feel like you're having fun. And, comparison, which she definitely talks about in that book, is part of what's causing that grind, but it might not be all. I'm kind of wondering, passion profile wise, what she's got going here.
I was wondering that too.
Right? Like, what if she's a thriver and she's trying to combine her art and her work, right? Like the way she makes money with art. And it's just it's maybe stealing some of the intrinsic joy out of it. That could be happening here too, which doesn't mean you don't like art. It just means, or being an artist, it might mean that combining it with work is not actually fulfilling to you.
Yeah, it could be the obligation of having to do it for a paycheck, but in your mind, you're connecting it to, I'm not good enough. But really all it is pressure. You're just calling the pressure something. So I'm not sure if you're not a thriver, this may or may not apply. But if you haven't, if you haven't taken the quiz, take the quiz, Andrea. If you haven't taken it in a while, maybe retake it and see if your passion profile lines up with how you're working. Because regardless of, my hunch is that, Rachel, you might have called it, she might be a thriver and the pressure is killing the joy of the art. But it could be something else. She could be a side hustler and is just doing the same things over and over again. And she's bored. And so she's not feeling inspired until she doesn't feel like she's doing good work. So I would read through your profile in depth. Also, if you took the passion profile quiz a while back, retake it, because we have really amped up the profile quiz results. This actually goes for anybody who took the quiz longer than a month ago. Because we have edited all of the profile PDFs and we've added quite a bit. So there's a lot more for you to consider now to see, is this really a function of how I'm working is messed up and like not aligned? Or is it about the what? Because I see that getting mixed up so often.
Yep. Okay, that's a lot for you to consider, Andrea. I'm still going to diagnose you with being bad at sucking at stuff. It's a classic diagnosis. And I'm not saying you suck. I'm just saying that most people, we are very bad at being not great at something. most of the people I coach struggle to learn something new because they're not accustomed to feeling bad at something from the outset, or feeling mediocre even. And one of the most challenging, but like rewarding and evolved, frankly, things that you can do as a person is get to the point where you enjoy the process of becoming. Like you're not done and you're not looking to be done. You're enjoying the process of breaking yourself down and building yourself back up, and breaking yourself down and building yourself back up. And most of us don't have a high tolerance for that because because it requires a certain level of vulnerability that most of us, quite frankly, are not fluent in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right?
I think I told this story a long time ago on the podcast, but I think it's relevant again, and I think it's going to be new to a lot of people. Back when my mom and dad were in college, they were dating like from orientation day in college. So that's kind of cute. And so my dad was always there every beginning of a new semester. And my mom she's just kind of a worrier. Like, she would admit that. She's a worrier. She likes to plan ahead. She's like this. She doesn't like to be bad at things. And before every semester started, she would go buy all her books for all her classes, bring them home, flip to the back of all the books, and cry because she didn't know how to do all the stuff in all the back of the books of the classes that she hadn't even started yet. And my dad would always laugh at her. And he still to this day tells that story because he's like, of course you don't know the stuff in the back of the book. You haven't even taken the class yet. Don't you think by the end of the class, you'll get how to do the stuff at the back of the book? And so now in our family, we use the phrase, stop looking in the back of the book. Like, essentially, stop looking at where you ultimately can be and will be and want to be, and recognize, I'm here now. I have to go through the class. I have to go through the experience to get to the back of the book. Otherwise, I'm never going to feel good enough. And I'm never going to feel like I've got it. Because guess what? As soon as one semester was over, another one started, and she would do the whole thing all over again. And that is life. So I want to tell Andrea, stop looking in the back of the book, which is stop looking at the seniors in your role and look at your work and say, what do I want to improve in this? What's exciting and inspiring to me? If I'm not comparing to anyone, I just want to grow in my art. Well, and then see if that is more motivating. That would be telling.
If you are going to compare, because these people be prancing around with their backs of books open, right? And they're like, look, Andrea, look at the back of my book. It's so much better than yours, right? Like, they're not doing that, but that's how you're interpreting it. Like, at least instead of taking it personally, which is what you're doing, you're taking the fact that there are people who are further along personally. You could be like, wow, that's really cool. That's where I will be.
Yes.
Like, if you're going to make it mean something about you, make it mean what you could achieve, not how shitty you are in comparison.
And maybe what can I learn from them instead of how do I compare myself to them?
Okay.
So thoughts. Andrea, come back to us with thoughts, because if this feels like it's lowered the pressure and it allows you to enjoy your work more, then that might be the answer. If it's not making any difference and you're like, I just never cared that much, I just fell into this line of work, I don't think it's really a right fit for me, that'll be clear too. So we want to hear your thoughts, because I feel like we left you with a lot of questions in response to your questions.
That's what coaching is. It is not answers. It's just more questions.
Dear Krachel is kind of strange because it's a long delay in the questions.
It really is. It's not really great coaching because you're not supposed to ask that many questions without getting any feedback. But, we don't have her here. So
long form coaching.
Okay. Question number 2. Dear Krachel, I've made it a point to stop going to the hardware store for milk and not seeking out emotional support from people who can't provide it. But what does one do when there's not but hardware stores in one's life? I still need milk and have nowhere to get it. Bailey. If you haven't heard that phrase, stop going to the hardware store for milk, it's a pretty common phrase, about like, hey, don't go somewhere that doesn't have what you need in order to try to get your need met. Kristen wrote a blog about it a while back, which I will link to in the show notes. But that is what Bailey is referring to for those of you who are like, what?
Right. Stop going to certain people for certain kinds of emotional support when they're just never going to be able to give that to you. It's just maddening. So a few thoughts here. First of all, I kind of want to clarify, like, what does she mean? What is her definition of milk here? Right? Like what is the
define milk?
Define milk in this context,
right?
What is the emotional support that you are craving and seeking, and not getting? And I want to ask that question first, because I think there's multiple parts to this. I think part of this is just not having the right people yet, and not having like the people who you can rely on. But I do wonder, I know you have some people, Andrea. You've got some people. So
Bailey.
Did I say? Oh, I'm still talking to Andrea.
Call her Andrea. No, we're on Bailey
now. Sorry, Bailey. Oh, my brain hasn't moved on yet. Bailey, I know you have some people. So first of all, how clear have you been in actually asking for what you want? Because I do think sometimes we don't really speak our needs, and then somebody doesn't give them to us, and then we think, well, they just can't give them to me. But they can't read your mind. So are there some people in your life who maybe want to meet some of your needs, but they don't know what they are? Like, do you need somebody to listen to you, and they're a solution person, and they keep coming to you with ideas and possibilities and solutions, and you're like, I just need to vent, and they're not giving that to you, so you think they can't? Well, can you ask them? Can I just vent to you? Maybe they're willing to give that to you if they know what you want.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's some people who are just not going to. Sometimes it really, truly is like you are in the hardware store, you are asking for milk. They're like, we got no milk. There's no milk here. Sorry. But that might be phase one. It's like, can we actually ask first before we assume?
Okay, that might be phase one. Phase 0 is what you said, define milk.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and I want to make sure we like really highlight that, because I think sometimes we don't actually realize how nuanced our needs are until we try to articulate them to ourselves. So if you want someone who's capable, or some, people in your life who are capable of meeting your needs, you need to be able to pretty clearly articulate, what are they? Like, what does it even mean for me to receive emotional support? Like, do I want a friend who I could call up, an hour a week and just talk deep stuff about life? Do I want, like a group that I could go to, like a community, right? Who I could connect with around similar interests? Like, do I know what my love language is? Mm-hmm. That would be a really interesting, helpful way to know how you want to receive support. For me, I know that quality time is like so important to me. So if I'm going to be in connection with someone, I know, and they're going to, and I want them to play an important role in my life, I know that they're going to have to be able to give quality time to me, or else it's not going to be a match. So the more you can articulate that, the better it will be for you to then, articulate that to other people currently, or people who haven't even entered your sphere yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. But first we need to clarify that internally. And as you clarify it, you might recognize there's some ways that you could be giving yourself more of what you need.
That's a huge piece of advice here, is like, if you want other people to meet your needs, you got to look at a great place to start, because you can't control other people, is where am I not meeting my own needs? And where could I get better at meeting my needs, period? Maybe not just emotional, like could be physical, could be spiritual. Like, where do I need to get better at meeting my own needs?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Not that we're telling you to isolate yourself, because of course we want other people to meet your needs as well. But there is something energetically that happens when you're taking really good care of yourself. Then it's almost like you start to expect and like attract people who are also going to take really good care of your needs and take really good care of their own needs too. So it's a healthy balance and doesn't turn into something codependent. I'm not saying that's where it's going, but I'm just saying, let's do that first.
This reminds me of chapter 6 of Forever Alone, by the way, for those of you who know, and those of you who don't, you better not. don't you dare just jump into chapter 6 of Forever Alone without listening to chapters 1 through 5 first.
It's a build.
Yeah. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, please search for Forever Alone in your favorite podcast app and listen to my mini series journey through singledom. What a journey it is. What a journey it continues to be. There will be a season 2 at some point. I am really building up some chapters for you right now.
I feel like you can't wait too much longer because you already have so much to put in season 2.
No, I've got a few chapters, but I'm looking to round it out with some better ones at this point. But that does remind me of what I talked about how I really wanted like a romantic partner to meet a lot of my needs, and that there's nothing wrong with having needs, that having needs is human, but that I had to come to terms with where I probably needed to do a better job of meeting my own needs. And then as I get better at meeting my needs, I'm becoming a match for someone who could do the same for me. And that's the point for Bailey too. Is none of us are perfect, aren't meeting in our own needs. And you don't have to be perfect, but I know that there's probably places where we're like not being the best parents to ourselves, where we're letting our bedtime slip and we're not taking ourselves for walks or exercise, or we're not hydrating properly, or we're letting ourselves scroll for an hour on Instagram before we go to bed instead of reading a book, right? Like there are ways that we can get better at meeting our needs and just habituate ourselves to expect that and to feel like we deserve that, which then magnetizes people to us who will do the same.
Yep. My last question for Bailey is where are you spending your time? Like maybe that's physically, maybe it's virtually if you're, working from home a lot, but where are you spending your time? And what are the environments like when you are interacting with people? So, for example, if you are in a work setting with people who they don't get you and you don't get them and it doesn't feel very aligned, then of course you don't feel like you have people you can lean on or people who can support you and you can support them. Or I know some clients have held on to some friendships since they were kids or teenagers, and those friendships are not really nourishing anymore, but it's more just comfortable.
Habitual.
Maybe not even comfortable anymore, but yeah, just expected. And they don't feel like they're meeting each other's needs anymore, but it just feels too hard to imagine letting it go. So if you're in a lot of scenarios with people who don't really care about the same things that you do and have the same values that you do and are interested in emotional intelligence and all of that, then that might make sense why it feels like you're constantly in a hardware store seeking milk, because you kind of are. And a good question might be, what would be better environments that are a better fit for you, that might be work related, that might be social, that it would be a more natural experience to be around and find and attract those people. So just another question to consider.
I'm going to add to that I wonder where you can focus on maybe giving, this is going to sound so gross, giving milk to people. Which, okay, I want to caveat this. I don't think the way to get emotional needs met is necessarily to give and give and give and give, hoping that people will give back to you. Okay, I'm not suggesting like over giving to the point of burnout. I'm just saying that sometimes I think it can feel good to be of service to people and to maybe step into like a mentorship kind of role where you're helping people who maybe are at a level where they're, they don't have the same wisdom or they don't have the same experience as you. And in mentoring them or in helping them in some way, you feel like in giving support, it's not necessarily that they're going to support you in the same way back, but that you might feel some sort of energy of like reciprocity in, I'm supporting and that feels really good. And then I'm experiencing their gratitude and that feels really good to me.
Yeah. That's a very emotionally nourishing.
Yeah.
It can be a very emotionally nourishing thing to do.
Right.
So So yeah, I do think maybe like let's examine your relationships now. Where did they come from? How did they start? And are you in environments where you just keep being around people who just they're not your people? I don't know. So we just gave you a lot of angles, Bailey, to look at this, but I'm hoping one or more resonate and spark something. And you can let us know where you think it might be stemming from. Is this a lack of self-love and self-nourishing? Or is this just not being clear enough about what you need to be able to ask for it, or feeling too vulnerable to ask for it? Or is this truly just, I've held on to certain relationships too long and they're no longer a fit and I might be ready for some new ones.
Or a combination of all of the above, potentially, which is usually the case in some way or another. Also, we did an episode of Dear Krachel. I think it was April 2021. I will link to it in the show notes. I don't remember exactly what we said, but the title was like, how do I get other people to meet my needs? So we have spoken on this before, and I think that would be a good one to listen to or re-listen to if this conversation is hitting you. Okay.
Last one. Dear Krachel, can you talk about how you balance your Thriver and Firestarter sides? Oh, if only you knew how relevant this question was. Always relevant, always for us. I feel like these two energies are coming into conflict for me. The first time I took the passion profile quiz, I got Thriver. After doing a ton of reflection on the kind of life I authentically want to live, I realized that I identify with the Thriver archetype because I depend on stability and security. I grew up in a household brimming with scarcity and lack, so not surprising, right? When I recently retook the quiz from a more empowered mindset, I got Firestarter, which makes sense because what I truly crave is freedom while making a living. I've tried working in a 9-to-5 office environment many times, but I always end up resenting it because it feels so out of alignment. Yet, I have a crippling fear about sacrificing stability for that freedom. How can someone have both? That is from Ready to Rebel.
Well, the first thing she's going to have to rebel against is the household brimming with scarcity and lack that she grew up in, and the crippling fear that she's talking about, which isn't really hers. She's inherited familial fear around stability and lack, as have most of us to some degree, because your parents' job was to make sure you survived. Parents are not typically good at advocating for their children's self-actualization. Like, it usually comes into contrast with just, I got to keep you alive. Okay. So just like do the safe thing, stay small, don't take risks. If you die, I'm going to it would end me. So I need you to just like not do anything scary. And so we inherit that and we become terrified of taking any risks or challenging ourselves sometimes to any degree. And we get really, really boxed in and claustrophobic, and we never self-actualize. So just like the words that she used tell me this is not like normal level of fear around stability. It's like crippling. It's brimming with, like, it's overflowing to a point that's not actually healthy, nor is it even really about her.
Yeah, those words stood out to me too. And honestly, even made me question, and I can't know for sure after just reading a quick question, but it does make me wonder, are you truly a balance between a Firestarter and a Thriver? Or are you just a Firestarter who's paralyzed by fear because of your scarcity mindset that got instilled into you really early on? I don't know the answer, because when you said you took the quiz more authentically and got Firestarter and it felt really good, but then the fear came in about losing stability, I'm like, is that I don't know. So
she might not be a Thriver. She might not.
You might have a balance, or you might just over-identify with Thriver because of that fear, that one particular fear. A little, could be a little different, right? If you weren't afraid of losing everything, does the rest of the Thriver profile still resonate with you? Because there's a lot more to Thrivers than just wanting stability. They want a lot more balance in their life. Often they want to not combine their passion and their work, not necessarily because of the stability, but because of the pressure of make them make money. So read back through your old Thriver profile, if you still have it, and see if the rest of it resonates. And that might be a good indicator. Am I a true balance of the two? Or am I just scared of losing stability? Because this kind of turns into a different conversation if you're not really
Maybe.
a thriver in the first place.
Though I will say that I've coached plenty of fire thrivers and or scaredy cat fire starters. And I think that a lot of them, especially the scaredy cat, let's focus on scaredy cat fire starters, okay? I think a lot of them have this weird assumption that being a fire starter inherently means like I have to go from zero to quit my job and have no idea where my money comes from overnight. I'm like, where did you get the idea that you can't build up to being a fire starter and that you have to inherently take like these grandiose risks or else you're not doing it right, or else it's not going to work, or else you're not going to enjoy yourself? I just don't think that that's true. And I've seen that not be true plenty of times. In fact, I think it actually works better when you don't jump to some extreme where you just quit your job and have no idea where your money is coming from. Well, of course you're freaking out and you're having a panic attack.
Right. And I get it, because fire starters, they're pretty intense. That's just part of how their profile tends to exhibit itself, is with a lot of intensity and a lot of all or nothing. And so I get where that comes from for fire starters, but it does help to remember being a fire starter doesn't mean throwing stability out the window. Being a fire starter just means you recognize that there's some risk in taking full responsibility for how and when and what you're working on. But it doesn't mean you say, I don't care about where the money comes from. I don't care how. That's not it at all. In fact, fire starters, typically, they want to make more money. They're really motivated by being able to see how their work becomes profitable for them. That's one of the things. They want to have like no cap on how much they can earn. So not caring about that is not necessarily a sign that you're not a true fire starter. And yeah, like that's maybe another good clarifying question. If you felt like you could take a slower, steadier approach into a more fire starter type role that maybe built up to some more risk, but did it in a more stable way and didn't have to make some giant, big, jumping off of a cliff decision, does it make it feel easier to embrace your fire starter side? Or would you still want some of that thriver balance?
I have a client right now, for example, if you're looking for examples of how to do it, again, I'm not recommending anything. We don't do prescriptions for passion profiles, okay? I don't do like, oh, if you're this, you should try being a consultant. No, get out of here with that request. I'm not telling you what to do. That's not what we do as coaches. Got to figure out what works for you. But I will tell you what worked for her as a Firestarter Thriver combo. She was working in a full-time job that was very demanding, and her hours were insane. She worked remotely, but she was on the East Coast and they were on the West Coast. So she would start working like early morning her time before anyone else started. And then they would start their day at like 10 a.m. her time. And then they'd be working until like midnight her time sometimes. And it was completely and utterly unsustainable. And she felt so trapped and she had no autonomy. And so she just up and quit. And she took like a couple months. She like put her stuff in storage. She moved in with her parents. She went on a couple of vacations. She just like did I'm just taking a sabbatical life for a little while. And then she decided, okay, while I'm figuring out what I want to do next, I do need to make money. So I guess I can freelance. Like what I was doing is something that I could freelance around. And so she ended up with one freelancing gig, and then someone else offered her a full-time job. But she got all of the red flags that she got before her last full-time job. She's like, oh, this is going to be a repeat. They're going to be demanding. They're going to want more hours from me than I want to give. And so she said, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to ask would you accept this as a freelancing role? And she goes, I never in a million years thought they would say yes. And they did. And I asked for $20 more an hour than the other freelancing role is paying me. And I get to do it on my terms. And there's like an end date, right? Like there's a date at which I don't have to do it anymore if it's not working for me. And if it is, then I could maybe like re-up and I could continue working with them. And so now she's basically like replaced her full-time income with 2 different freelancing gigs that are on her time. Right. So she has like this balance of the Firestarter. I have the autonomy. I have the independence. It's on my terms. I'm telling them how much money I'm making. I'm telling them when I can and what will not work and what works for me. But the Thriver, I have stability. I know where my money's coming from for a while. And I have bosses. Like I have people telling me what to do. I don't even have to figure out what I'm doing. I show up and I do the work. So I'm not really running my own business necessarily, but I am doing it on my terms. So there's someone who the Thriver thing wasn't working for her. Like the 9 to 5 was not working, but full Firestarter probably wouldn't have worked either. And so she found a way to do it both. And now she's actually going to be doing both of those while working from Europe for the summer. Just, you want to throw that in there. I did ask her to do a normal person interview maybe this fall after she gets back from Europe. So that'll be a fun story to dive into, I hope. But like, it's possible. It's 100% possible. But if you're so crippled by fear, you might not have even allowed yourself to consider what she just did, because even that might feel too risky or scary, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. You have to be open to ways, because right now I feel like if you are indeed a balance of Firestarter and Thriver, Thriver is winning out. Thriver is getting all its needs met. It is like doing great. The Firestarter part of you is feeling pretty neglected. And that's where the resentment is coming in. That's where the dissatisfaction is creeping in. So in order to have real internal stability, you have to give both parts of you what they need. And you have to be open to maybe some out of the box ways of doing that. Because again, I think she has this idea that if I quote unquote indulge, right? If I indulge my Firestarter, that means throwing out all of my Thriver needs. The point of having a balance of profiles is that both of them need to get met in different ways. So in order to really balance these in a way that's going to be sustainable, we have to amp up some of that Firestarter energy, a little bit more independence and a little bit more freedom and a little bit more autonomy and a little bit more passion for what you're doing, without completely throwing out all of the stuff that your Thriver is feeling really great about right now. So stability and freedom are not opposites. I think we've said it a lot of times. Often, some degree of stability allows you to have the freedom to explore and to try new things. So that might look like what Rachel just said, doing a version of your current job, but doing it in a more of a Firestarter container. And that might feel really different. It might look like scaling back a little bit on the Thriver job so that you can give a little bit more to your Firestarter ideas, or pursue something that's a little bit more Firestarter-y in general. Or it might look, for some people, they might want a job that has more flexibility. So maybe even if it's similar type of work, but a lot more flexibility of schedule or location, or cut out the commute, or think outside the box for how do I give my Firestarter just a little bit more of what it needs, and just a little bit more. We can slowly turn that dial up without totally throwing in the towel.
Here's my question for Ready to Rebel. What is the minimum viable amount of Thriver energy you need to function? What is the minimum viable amount of Firestarter energy you need to function? And by function, I don't necessarily mean like have a pulse. I mean like that would satisfy you. That would not send you, like for Thriver, what's the minimum amount of Thriver energy I need so that I don't spiral into a panic? Knowing that over time you could potentially scale back and back and back because you get more and more comfortable with risk. But let's call it what it is right now. You have a low tolerance for risk at the moment because of this ingrained familial fear that you have inherited. Okay, fine. I'll deal with that. So what's the minimum amount of Thriver energy, you kind of need in order to not spiral into panic. What is that? Like, actually try to break that down. Like, how much money would I need to be making baseline? Let's say I had another source of income as a fire starter. How much baseline thriver money from a job, from a part-time job? Like, would I be able to explore my fire starter if I had a job that enabled me to pay my mortgage and my car payment every month? Okay, then what does that allow me to, then what space does that allow me to explore in the fire starter side?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, and for your minimum viable fire starter, okay, I need 5 hours a week to focus on this project that I'm working on, or else I'm not going to be happy. Like, or I need minimum, at least if I'm going to have a 40-hour a week job, minimum, I need to be able to make my own schedule completely. Or I need it to be fully remote so that I can work when I want to work and not work when I don't want to work and have time for my other things. Like, what is the minimum viable thing on either one of those sides that is going to satisfy both?
And then we can work the dials a little bit until we get to the right balance. But we have to know, like, where can we start? You're right, because I'm sensing that your fire starter doesn't even have its minimum viable needs met right now.
Doesn't even maybe know what they are.
We need to figure out what those are and say, how can I get those now without upsetting the whole apple cart of my life? And then we can slowly work up from there. But it doesn't have to be this wildly like throwing your whole, stability in life off of a cliff in order to get that met. I don't think it needs to be, and I don't think it should be, frankly. Mm-hmm. To be honest, full fire starters who are not scaredy cat fire starters need to hear that too, because they're the more likely ones to fling themselves off a cliff and just hope they'll figure it out. But like, the slow and steady approach would probably work better for them too.
Yeah, they're also the most likely to be okay when they do fling themselves off the cliff. Sure, like they'll get beat up, they'll walk away. Yeah, but they'll walk away from it mostly like okay, right? It's the scaredy cat ones that don't think they have the resilience to survive a crash. Mm-hmm. So we got to do exposure therapy, basically. Like, we need to scale back on the thriver to a point that makes you uncomfortable, but not panicked, so that you have room to scale up on the fire starter. Right? Because like right now we got 100%. And unless you scale back on the thriver, you don't have any room to amp up your fire starter.
Yep. It's crowded out.
And this applies to more than just thrivers and fire starters. Okay. Like, this applies to any person who has conflicting values.
Yes.
Like, I want connection, but I need alone time. Okay, great. What's the minimum amount of alone time you need in order to feel like a functioning introvert, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Like, how can we get that? And then what's the minimum amount of connection you need? Like, in order to satisfy you? Like, do this with anything that feels conflicting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I am. I'm imagining like dials where we're trying to get quite the right balance, but we have to fiddle with them a little bit first.
Yeah, it's a fine tune.
It's fine. Yeah, we're fine tuning. But at first you have to figure out like, where is the set point where I don't.
And some of y'all be going in there and you're just taking those dials and you're going from 0 to 100 because that'll fix it. Right?
I'm just, like, burn myself up on this hot stove.
No. And some of you imagine doing that and think that's the only option. So you won't even touch the dial because you're afraid of doing that.
Right.
That's where Ready to Rebel is like, she's not crazy, so she's not gonna do that. But she doesn't realize that's not her only choice.
Like low heat. We don't have to fling it on to like
10% higher.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Just tweak it. That might make a big difference, actually. That alone.
I find that those small tweaks at the beginning tend to snowball, right? Like, you build momentum and you acclimate to each new sort of phase and level that you up level to. And eventually you're not even noticing yourself acclimating higher and higher. Mm-hmm. Then you're just not afraid anymore.
You'll get clear on where the balance is. Are you really just a full fire starter? Or do you want that nice balance between Firestarter and Thriver? But you kind of can't know right now because the fear is clouding it all up. So the more you start to fiddle with those dials, the more obvious it'll be. Can you just let the Thriver part go because it wasn't really you anyway? Or does it actually have a place there? And we need to honor that. It'll become clear.
Okay. oh my gosh, there's so much more we could coach Ready to Rebel on. Like, I want to dive into that family history and like,
also, but how much have we lived the experience of that?
I know.
Fire thriver.
Every day.
Delicate balance.
It's not a set it and forget it Ready to Rebel. It is every day I'm fine tuning those dials myself.
Yeah. You don't get the right setting of the dials and then you're like, great. We're good.
I mean, maybe for like a few weeks or a few months, like at this point, but no, there's just, especially if you introduce some new big change or something that your life needs to then acclimate to, like you move, or, like Kristen, like your dog needs emergency surgery, and like every big
she's
thing.
Okay now.
Yeah, she's fine. But every big thing will cause you to have to fine tune again. And like, that's life. So that's not a problem. It's just a little bit exhausting, but that's kind of being a conscious person who's trying to live an intentional life. Sorry, it's the toll you pay. Worth it to live a life in alignment with who you are and how you want to feel and what your values are.
Well, I feel like we left all three of these people with so many questions to think about. So I hope some of you will let us know what your answers are, or what your next series of questions are.
What's your reaction to all of that? Are you just spinning your little wheels even more? Did we just, I don't know. Sometimes I just think we overwhelm people with our questions and then they take like 6 months to process what we said before we get an update. It's fine.
It's okay. And if you're not one of these three, but something sparked you or something resonated, we want to hear that too. Let us know.
Yeah, leave a comment. And of course, if you want to ask us or submit a question for a future episode of Dear Krachel, there is a link in the show notes. Every show notes of every episode has a link to Dear Krachel. So if you're just happen to be listening to us anytime and it occurs to you to ask us something, go to the link in that show notes, or you can always email us at contact@clarityonfire.com, subject line Dear Krachel, and ask us whatever you want to ask us. Okay. Well, that was good. And
I was gonna say, we'll be back next week. We may or may not be back next week. As alluded to, life has been a little crazy. I was responsible for getting us a normal person interview, and then life smacked me in the face, including my dog's emergency surgery. So that didn't happen. You're not going to get that, but you might get something else, or you might get a break. I'm not sure.
It'll be anyone's
It'll
guess.
be a surprise next week if we pop up on your podcast feed or not. But we will certainly be back in 2 weeks.
Yes. If not, enjoy your break. And go back and listen to an old episode. There's, 340 or 50 at this point.
And several we linked to in this episode that you could use as your next week's episode if you want to.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, we will see you next time.
Bye.